From now on, Mom, the bank will transfer your pension straight into my account. You don't need anything anymore. You just need a corner to die in. My throat just seized, and I couldn't say a word. But that night, when he opened the refrigerator, he froze, then started screaming. His scream tore through the silence of the house, sharp as a blade slicing through old wool. It was so loud that all the dogs in the neighborhood began barking wildly, as if they sensed a disaster unfolding. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Tremblay, turned on her porch light. I heard Mr. Henderson's gate creak open. The whole neighborhood woke up. Yet, I stayed seated in my rocking chair on the back porch, wrapped in the wool afghan my mother had knitted 40 years ago, staring at the stars above me. 1, 2, 3. I lost count when the screaming started again. And for the first time in 67 years of living, I smiled, because someone was finally screaming because of me. You might wonder, what kind of mother smiles when her own son screams like that? What kind of woman just sits there rocking calmly while chaos erupts inside her home? Let me tell you, the kind of woman who's been crushed for 3 long months, the kind of woman who's been turned into a shadow inside her own house, a woman whose money was stolen, whose dignity was trampled, and whose voice was silenced by her own flesh and blood. The story I'm about to tell you, with my heart still aching and my hands still trembling from suppressed rage, didn't begin that night of screaming. It began 3 months earlier, on the day I buried my husband, and unknowingly buried my freedom with him. But before I take you down that dark road, I need to ask you one thing. Subscribe to this channel, because stories like mine need to be told, to be heard, and to serve as a warning to women who are living quietly with the same kind of pain. Go ahead, click that red button, because you'll want to hear how it ends. I promise you that. Now, let me take you back to the day everything started to fall apart. It was a gloomy Thursday morning in July when we lowered the coffin into the ground. The sky over Kingston was gray and heavy, carrying the grief of every widow on earth. I wore a simple black dress I had bought in a hurry from a store downtown because, in 42 years of marriage, I had never needed mourning clothes. Arthur, my husband, had always been too stubborn to die, until his heart decided it couldn't take it anymore. Heart attack, the doctor said. Quick, painless, without a goodbye. He'd been fixing the fence in the backyard that Monday morning. When I called him in for lunch, I found him lying on the grass, a pair of pliers still in his hand. During the funeral, people came to hug me, saying all the familiar phrases. He's in a better place now. God has his reasons. Stay strong, Elaine. I felt torn in two. Part of me grieved deeply for the breakfasts we'd never share again, for the silly arguments over Time's hockey night in Canada *, for the faint scent of him still clinging to his pillow. 42 years can't be erased in a single moment. We had taken root in each other, even if sometimes those roots hurt. But the other half of me, the part I feel guilty admitting, felt relieved. Arthur was a good man, hard-working, never harsh or violent, but he was controlling. Every dollar in the house was under his supervision, as if my work, my efforts, didn't count. For decades, I was a public school teacher right here in Kingston. I retired with a worn-out back and a hoarse voice from years of teaching. Yet, my pension from the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan went into his Times account, and he'd hand me $1,000 a month for household expenses and for myself. $1,000, like pocket money for a child. Whenever I wanted a new pair of shoes, a dress, or a lipstick from Shoppers Drug Mart, he'd frown. "Do you really need it, Elaine? We should save." Save for what? I never knew. The house was paid off. No debts. But he held on to money like someone guarding water in a desert, afraid one day it would run dry. And when he died, I felt the hollow space he left behind. The lawyer handling the estate, Miss Wallace, a refined woman with silver glasses and the faint scent of expensive perfume, called me to her office 2 weeks after the funeral. She opened a brown folder, her voice professional, almost detached. I didn't understand everything, but some numbers snapped me awake. Our house, in a quiet neighborhood in Kingston, was valued at $850,000. Debt-free, mortgage-free. And the most important detail, Arthur had put everything in my name in his will, something I hadn't known. "Your husband wanted to make sure you'd be protected," Miss Wallace said, adjusting her glasses. He even added a note saying that if your son ever tried to claim your assets, the entire estate would go to charity instead. I froze. Arthur had never said anything, but now that I thought about it, I remembered how he always avoided giving money to our son, Mark. He never trusted him. "There's more," Miss Wallace continued. "His savings, life insurance, and retirement funds total $180,000. All yours." I was speechless. $180,000, a house worth nearly $1 million, and a monthly pension of more than $3,500. For the first time in my life, I was the owner of my own existence. I left the office on trembling legs, my heart pounding not from joy, but from the unfamiliar rush of freedom. The strange, thrilling, and slightly terrifying feeling of being able to decide for myself, buy what I wanted, go where I pleased, live how I chose. But I soon learned that freedom is fragile, especially when someone's waiting to steal it from you. That afternoon, I stood in the living room looking at the old furniture, faded curtains, and the bulky, outdated TV. I thought about redecorating, about traveling, about that deep blue sofa I'd seen in the furniture store, the one that cost $2,800 and had haunted my dreams. I smiled at the thought. But my smile faded quickly, because just 2 days later, the doorbell rang. And when I opened the door, there he was, Mark, my only son, standing with 2 big suitcases, a backpack, and that crooked smile he always wore when he wanted something. "Hi, Mum," he said, walking in without waiting for an invitation. "I'm staying for a few days. We need to talk." And just like that, with 2 suitcases and 1 fake smile, hell walked into my home. You want to know why he came back? Why now? And what happened when he found out I had money? Stay with me, because the worst is yet to come. Mark never showed up without a reason. In the past 10 years, he'd visited me maybe 6 times, always in a hurry, always with an excuse. He lived in Toronto, just a few hours' drive down the 401, but the distance between us was far greater, an ocean of silence and broken promises. At his father's funeral, he showed up late. The service had already started when he walked in, wearing a wrinkled shirt and jeans like he'd just rolled out of bed. He didn't cry. He stood at the back with his arms crossed, occasionally glancing at his phone. When it was over, he gave me a half-hearted hug and said, "If you need anything, call me. I'll stay for a few days to help." But he didn't. The next morning, he was gone. Said he had an important interview. He didn't help me with the paperwork or stay with me through those suffocatingly lonely nights. And yet, 2 weeks later, he came back with luggage in hand. "Sarah kicked me out," he said, tossing his bags on the Chesterfield like he still lived there. "We had a big fight. She told me to leave." Sarah was the 3rd woman I'd heard about, though I'd never met any of them. I only knew their names from the blurry photos he sent and the stories he told when he needed to borrow money. "What about work?" I asked, standing by the door. He shrugged, opened the fridge, and drank orange juice straight from the carton. "Didn't work out. The boss promised $4,000, but the contract said only $2,500. I'm not an idiot. I quit." My stomach sank. I'd heard this story too many times. Mark always had a reason for being unemployed. The boss was unfair, the pay too low, the hours too long, the company unstable. I wanted to ask, "So, what have you been doing for the past 5 months? Why didn't you call me?" But I didn't. I already knew the answer. He only remembered me when he needed something. "Do as you like," I said, forcing a smile. "Your room's still the same." The small back room with a single bed, a creaky dresser, and the old band posters still stuck to the walls from his teenage years. I'd never taken them down. Maybe deep down, I still hoped he'd come home as the boy he once was. But the man who walked in that day wasn't that boy anymore. He was 38 now, his belly softening, his hair thinning, dark circles under his eyes. He dropped his bags on the floor, fell onto the bed without even taking off his shoes. "I just need some time to get back on track, Mom. A few days." A few days turned into a week turned into 2, and me, as always, I let it happen. At first I was glad to have someone around. The house had felt too empty since Arthur died. I often woke in the middle of the night, reaching for him before remembering he was gone. That emptiness swallowed me whole. Having Mark there, the sound of the TV late at night, the smell of reheated food in the kitchen made me feel less alone. Though most of the time he just stayed in his room or sprawled across the Chesterfield, watching videos on his phone at a volume that made my head throb. I cooked for him, did his laundry, cleaned up his mess. Every time he ate without a thank you, left dirty dishes in the sink, or complained the food was bland, I swallowed my anger and told myself, he's going through a hard time. Be patient. Then came the requests. Mom, can I borrow $900? Need some work clothes for interviews. I gave it. Mom, my phone broke. Need a new one to job hunt. Around $1,300. I gave it. Mom, my beat-up old Civic broke down. Repairs cost $700. I gave it again. Each time he'd say, I'll pay you back, Mom, once I get a job. But the job never came, and the money never returned. Miss Wallace had already transferred the full $180,000 into my savings account. I printed the statement and kept it in a blue folder along with my mother's jewelry and important documents. Every night before bed, I'd open that blue folder and look at the numbers, $180,000. It was a kind of safety I'd never known, a chance to live the rest of my life with dignity, proof that I still mattered. But each time Mark asked for money, that number shrank. $179,100. Then $177,800. Then less. He didn't even blink when asking for more. One evening, as I was washing dishes after dinner, Mark walked into the kitchen, sat down, and started scrolling through his phone. He stayed silent for a while, then said without looking up, Mom, we need to talk about your finances. My hands froze under the faucet. My finances? I repeated slowly. Yeah. How much do you still have in your savings? Around 150 grand? My heart stopped. How did he know? Mark, that's none of your business. He laughed softly, coldly. None of my business? I'm your son, the only one you have. If you die tomorrow, where does that money go? The church? Some stranger? I turned, wiping my hands on a towel. I'm not dying, Mark. But you will eventually, Mom. You're 67, living alone. Anything could happen. His tone carried no concern, no care, only calculation, like he was already measuring how much time I had left. A chill ran down my spine. I'm fine, Mark. I don't need anyone to manage my life. He shrugged, still not looking up. Whatever, Mom. Just saying you should get things in order. It's for your own good. Then he left the kitchen while I stood there, my hands trembling, my chest tight. That was the first time I realized I was afraid of my own son. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought of Arthur, of the clause in his will, of whether he had seen in Mark what I refused to believe. I clutched the pillow that still smelled faintly of his cologne and cried quietly, afraid Mark might hear. I knew then my freedom had an expiration date and time was running out. But what exactly was Mark planning? How far would he go? Why, every time I looked at him, did I see a stranger wearing my son's face? Stay with me, because the descent into that darkness was only beginning. Those first few weeks with Mark felt like living with a noisy ghost. He took up space without truly being there. He woke late, usually after 11 a.m., and shuffled into the kitchen in shorts, shirtless, eyes still swollen from sleep. He'd open the fridge and stare into it, as if expecting the food to jump out on its own. He took whatever he wanted, the yogurt I bought for the week, the slice of cheese I'd been saving, the last butter tart, and ate it right there. No plate, no napkin, never asked, never thanked. I stood by the sink, pretending to wash a cup that was already clean, just so I wouldn't have to look at him, because every time I did, a slow, burning anger rose in my throat. An anger I couldn't name, because a mother isn't supposed to be angry at her son. A mother is supposed to love, to be patient, to forgive. But patience has limits, and mine was running out. Mark spent his days scrolling the internet, watching videos, or playing games on the old computer he brought. Whenever I asked about finding a job, he'd say, I've sent out a few applications. I'm waiting to hear back, but no one ever called, or if they did, he wasn't satisfied. They offered me warehouse work, $20 an hour. Are they kidding? I finished high school, have sales experience, worked with important people. I'm not lowering myself like that. I bit my lip. Asterisk, lowering himself. Asterisk, I wanted to ask, You're unemployed, living off your mother, eating food bought with her pension. What's lower than that? But I stayed silent. I just turned back to the stove, stirring the pot of beans, because I still had hope that it was just a phase. That one morning he'd wake up and change. But hope is dangerous. It makes you endure the unbearable for far too long. That Friday night, the insults began. I cooked a roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and peas. A simple, good Canadian meal, made with love. I set the table, called him, and sat down. He came over, eyes still glued to his phone, sat, stabbed a piece of chicken, chewed slowly, then frowned. "Mum, the chicken's dry." I froze. "Dry?" "Yeah. You overcooked it." I looked at the chicken on my own plate. Tender, flavorful, perfectly fine. "It tastes good to me, Mark." He shrugged and tossed the half-chewed piece back onto his plate. "Maybe to you, but I'm not eating it." He got up, phone in hand, and walked to the living room. The TV blared seconds later. He was probably ordering Uber Eats again. I sat there, staring at the meal I'd cooked with all my heart. My eyes stung, not because he criticized the food, but because of the ingratitude, the cold cruelty that had become so casual. I ate alone in silence, each bite heavy as stone. The days that followed were filled with more complaints. "Mum, the Wi-Fi sucks. Upgrade it." "Mum, the house feels like an oven. Turn on the A divided by C." "Mum, buy better coffee. This Nabob brand is garbage." Whenever I tried to explain that I could only afford that Wi-Fi plan, that running the A divided by C all day would hike up the power bill, that I'd been drinking this coffee for years, he'd sigh impatiently, as if I were a stubborn child who just didn't understand. Little by little, Mark took over the house, not to take care of it, but to rule it. He'd change the TV channel while I was watching a movie, spread his work things across the kitchen table, so I had to eat on the Chesterfield, leave dirty clothes all over the bathroom, use my towels, drink juice straight from the jug. Whenever I gently said something, afraid he'd think I was nagging, he'd reply, "Come on, Mum, this is my house too." But it wasn't. It was mine, and he knew that. One morning as I was sweeping the porch, my neighbor, Mrs. Tremblay, leaned over the fence, her tone curious. "Elaine, is Mark living with you now?" I forced a smile. "Just temporarily. He's getting his life together." She shook her head, eyes glinting knowingly. "Men near 40 don't get their life together, dear. They get comfortable, and then they stay." My face burned. Not because of her, but because she was right. Everyone would think the same, that I was the foolish old woman letting her lazy son come back and drain the rest of her life away. "He's my son, Mrs. T. I can't throw him out." She gave a thin smile. "Mothers never throw their sons out, but sons can throw their mothers away. Remember that." She went back inside, leaving me there holding my broom and a heavy heart. That night, after washing the pile of dishes Mark had ignored, I went to my room and opened the blue folder. Balance, $170,300. In less than a month, nearly $10,000 had vanished. Interview clothes, gas, car repairs, back pain, medicine. There was always a reason, always an emergency. And me, I always gave in. Because I was afraid. Afraid he'd leave and never come back. Afraid of being truly alone. Afraid of dying in this house and only being found when the neighbors smelled decay. I was buying my son's presents with my own money, and he took it without an ounce of guilt. I closed the folder, hugged my pillow, and cried myself to sleep. But worse was still coming. A week later, on a Saturday afternoon, Mark opened my bedroom door without knocking. His face was serious. He dragged the chair from my vanity, sat across from me with his legs spread and his hands on his knees. "Mum, we need to talk. Seriously." My stomach went cold. "About what?" He took a deep breath, his tone heavy. "About your money. About this house. About the future. You can't keep living like this, with no plan, no structure. Now that I'm here, I'll take care of everything." And right then the abyss opened. I realized I was living with a stranger, and a dangerous one. In life, there are moments when you realize you've lost control. Not loudly, not clearly, but quietly, like sand slipping through your fingers. The more you try to hold on, the faster it falls away. I was living that moment and didn't even know it yet. Mark sat in front of me on the old, creaky chair. His expression was stern, almost paternal, as if about to deliver some great wisdom. "You're 67, Mum," he began slowly. "Your memory isn't what it used to be. That's normal." Pain struck my chest. "My memory is fine, Mark." He gave me a pitying smile. The kind doctors give stubborn patients. "I know you think so, but haven't you noticed you've been forgetting things lately? You left the stove on the other day. Last week, you left your keys in the door. Older people are easy targets, Mum. Anyone could take advantage of you." I was about to respond, but he continued, not giving me a chance. "Now that I'm here, I can help. I'm your son. Let me help you. We'll reorganize your finances, put everything under one plan. You'll feel safer, and so will I." His words sounded reasonable, even gentle. But something was wrong. Something vague, twisting in my gut. "What do you mean? Reorganize?" I asked, my voice small. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "First, we should combine everything into one account. Your savings, your pension, everything. I'll take care of it all, Mum. Pay the bills, buy groceries, manage everything. You won't have to worry about a thing." My heart started to pound. "But I can still manage, Mark. I've been doing it alone." "I know, but it's tiring. You should relax and enjoy your golden years. Let me handle it." Asterisk. Relax and enjoy your golden years. Asterisk. As if I were some senile old woman who couldn't tie her own shoes. He didn't wait for an answer. The next morning, I was woken by knocking on my door. "Mum, get up. We have to go to the bank. I made an appointment." I was still in my pajamas, blinking at the clock on my nightstand. "What time, Mark?" "Now. The branch manager's only free this morning. Get dressed." I could have said no, could have locked the door and gone back to bed, but I didn't. Because mothers always listen to their sons, right? They don't question, they trust. How foolish. At our local BMO branch, Mark led me down the hallway like a child lost in a mall. He gripped my arm, practically pushing me forward. The manager, a man around 30 inches in navy blue suit and striped tie, greeted us politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Scott. Your son explained everything. You'd like to give him power of attorney over your account, correct?" My mouth opened, then closed again. I looked at Mark, who placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's just for convenience, Mum. I'll handle everything, so you don't have to come to the bank anymore." The manager added, "With this authorization, he can transfer funds, pay bills, withdraw money, everything on your behalf. It's very common in families, especially when parents get older. Asterisk older. Asterisk. The word hit me like a brick. I wasn't disabled or senile. I was 67, not 90. I still drove, cooked, cleaned, but in that room, everyone looked at me like I was helpless. I need to think about it." Mark squeezed my shoulder so hard it hurt. "Mum, we're already here. Just sign it." The manager slid the pen across the desk, and I, foolishly, signed. When we left the bank, Mark was beaming like he'd just won a prize. He stopped by the Tim Hortons nearby, bought coffee and a muffin, and handed them to me as if we were celebrating. "It's all set now, Mum. Everything's organized. You can relax." But I couldn't relax. My throat felt tight, my hands cold, even in the August heat. I wanted to cry, though I didn't know why. When we got home, Mark went straight to his computer. I stood in the kitchen staring out the window at Mrs. Tremblay hanging laundry, just as I'd done that morning. 2 days later, he walked into the kitchen while I was peeling potatoes. Leaning against the fridge with his arms crossed, he dropped the bomb. "Mum, I talked to the bank. Starting next month, your pension will be deposited directly into my account. It'll be easier that way." The knife slipped from my hand, clattering onto the floor. "What?" "It's better, Mum. I'll pay the bills, buy what we need, take care of everything. You don't need anything, except a place to rest." Asterisk rest. Asterisk. That word again. But this time it sounded different, like erased, like an ending. "Mark, that money is mine." He sighed in irritation. "I know, Mum, but I'll manage it now. It's for your own good." Asterisk. For my own good. Asterisk. I swallowed hard, wanting to scream, to rip up those papers, to run to the bank and undo everything. But I did nothing. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the sink as the world around me collapsed. Because I had just given away my freedom to my own son. From that day on, everything changed. Mark took control of everything. He did the grocery shopping, always choosing the cheapest no-name brand items and the smallest quantities. When I asked him to buy something, he rolled his eyes. "You don't need that, Mum. We have to save." Save. With times my time's money. He changed the Wi-Fi password and refused to tell me, saying I wasted data watching videos. He started monitoring the electricity, complaining whenever I left the kitchen light on. "Hydro bills are expensive, Mum. Be careful." I felt like a stranger in my own home. At the end of the month, he called me into the living room and handed me 5 $100 bills. "Here, Mum. Your allowance." I looked at the cash in his hand like it was fake. "Allowance?" "Yeah. $500 for your personal needs. If you need more, let me know." $500. While my pension was over $3,000, $500, and my savings over $150,000. "Mark, I need more than that." "For what, Mum?" "You don't go out, I cover everything. That's plenty." I took the money with trembling hands, went to my room, locked the door, and cried. I cried out of anger, humiliation, and fear. I had become a prisoner in my own life. Lying there staring at the ceiling, I thought about Arthur, my late husband, who used to control our finances, hand me money like a child's allowance, decide what was worth buying. For 42 years I had dreamed of freedom, and when I finally had it, I handed it over to another man. The only difference was that Arthur, strict as he was, loved me. We built a life together, but Mark, he was just using me, and I let him. How could I be so foolish? And would he ever stop? Or was this only the beginning? Stay with me, because the abyss had no bottom yet. There's a difference between living and merely existing. I learned that the cruel way. Living is when you wake up with purpose, when you can choose what to eat, what to wear, where to go. When you have a voice. Existing is when you're just another object in the house taking up space but meaningless. That was me then. A woman merely existing in her own home. The first weeks after Mark took control of the money were a series of small humiliations that built an invisible prison, slowly tightening around me. He controlled everything, from the groceries to my daily life. He always bought the cheapest no-name rice, sticky and mushy, beans full of pebbles I had to pick through, my back aching, the cheapest cuts of meat, tough and gristly. "Just saving, Mum. You don't eat much anyway." I still had all my teeth, still strong, but he talked as if I were too old to chew. One day, I asked him to buy a jar of olives. I had always loved olives, but Arthur hated them, so for 42 years I never bought any. Now that he was gone, I thought I finally could. "Olives?" Mark scoffed. "That's extravagant, Mum. We can't afford fancy stuff like that." "Can't afford it?" I said, my voice sharper than usual. "Mark, I have over $150,000 in my account." He looked at me with the same irritated expression adults use with children. "You times use times too, Mum. Now I'm times using it wisely. For our future. Our time's future. As if his future were being built on my money. I never bought the olives. And after that, I stopped asking for anything at all. My friends stopped visiting. Sharon, my closest friend for over 30 years, still called every week, inviting me out for lunch, coffee, or just to chat. But every time I agreed, Mark came up with an excuse. "Mum, it's too hot out right now. Your blood pressure could spike. Rest. Or maybe next time." Until one day, he answered the phone himself and said in that soft, caring voice, "Hi, Sharon. My mum's not feeling well lately. She's been very tired. When she's better, I'll let you know." Then he hung up. I was sitting less than 10 feet away. I wasn't tired. I wasn't sick. I was perfectly fine, but he decided I was ill. And Sharon believed him. Because sons don't lie about their mother's health, right? After that, she stopped calling. And I sank deeper into loneliness. Whenever someone knocked Mrs. Tremblay, the mail carrier, anyone Mark was always the one to answer. He'd open the door just a crack, blocking the entrance with his body, and say quickly, "My mum's resting. She can't have visitors right now," as if I were disabled, too frail to say hello. I watched from my bedroom window, saw it all, felt the slow burn of anger rise, but I couldn't do anything. I couldn't yell, couldn't push the door open and shout, "I'm here! I'm alive!" Because a part of me had already broken, and I didn't know how to fix it. His control didn't stop with the money or the phone calls. He began deciding what I could wear. One morning, I put on a floral dress I'd bought long ago but never worn. It was light and lovely, and for the first time in months, I felt like a woman again. I looked in the mirror and smiled. When I walked downstairs, Mark looked me up and down and smirked. "Where are you going, Mum?" "Nowhere. I just wanted to wear it." He shook his head, scrolling through his phone. "Floral dresses at your age look ridiculous. You should dress more modestly, appropriately." My face burned with shame. I went back upstairs, changed into an old blouse, and looked into the mirror again. But I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Pale, faded, invisible. Exactly what Mark wanted me to become. But the worst came when I discovered what he had done with my money. One afternoon, Mark went out to run errands, leaving his computer open on the table. I was mopping the floor when the screen lit up. Normally, I never snooped, but something pulled me closer. On the screen was a WhatsApp web chat with a building supply seller, confirming the order: luxury hardwood flooring, premium wall paint, imported faucets. Total: $15,000. Delivery address: 215 Wellington Street, apartment 301. My heart froze. I knew that address. It was a new condo building in one of Kingston's most expensive neighborhoods. Mark had once mentioned he was investing in an apartment there. Investing. With my times money. I opened his browser history. The more I saw, the tighter my chest grew. Custom furniture invoices, a $2,000 refrigerator receipt, a www.com, an $18,000 transfer to an electronics store, and another $23,600 to a construction company. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the mouse. Over $75,000, gone from my savings, to decorate an apartment he had never dared to mention. I collapsed onto the sofa. My legs weak, heart pounding, head spinning. I wanted to vomit. He wasn't times managing times my finances. He was times robbing, times me. And the worst part was, I had let him. I had signed the papers, I had handed the keys to the thief myself. When Mark came home hours later, I was still sitting there. He tossed his keys on the table, opened the fridge. "Mum, is there anything to eat?" I couldn't answer. My throat locked up. He grabbed a container of leftovers, microwaved it, ate while scrolling his phone, left the dirty plate on the counter, and went to his room. I stayed there, staring at nothing. That night, lying in bed, I thought about giving up, letting him take it all, letting him do whatever he wanted. Maybe it would be easier. Just close my eyes, accept it, and wait until my body couldn't take it anymore. What could I even do? Fight him? A 38-year-old man, strong, clever, sharper than me? What would I tell the police? That I'd signed over power of attorney and now regretted it. They'd laugh. I thought I had no way out. But sometimes when you hit rock bottom, you have only two choices: sink completely or push yourself back up. And my moment was coming. Stay with me, because change was closer than I realized. Have you ever felt yourself disappearing? Not all at once, but little by little. Each day, another piece of you fades away. First your voice, then your joy, then the will to get out of bed. Until one day, you look in the mirror and don't recognize who's looking back. I was disappearing, and no one noticed. Or worse, no one cared. It had been nearly 2 months since Mark took control of my life. 2 months of living on a $500 allowance, eating cheap food, wearing old clothes, trapped inside my own house like a criminal. I'd lost over 15 pounds. My clothes hung loose. My hip bones jutted out. My eyes were sunken. The dark circles never faded. Every night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd let it come to this, wondering how much money he had spent, and whether I'd ever be brave enough to fight back. But whenever I imagined confronting him, my body froze, as if my spine had been pulled out and only a fragile shell remained. Until that Wednesday morning, at the supermarket. Mark was out taking care of business, which I knew meant spending more of my money on his secret apartment. Before leaving, he handed me a note and a $20 bill. "Mum, buy laundry detergent and sponges. If there's anything left, get some bread." $20. For detergent, sponges, and bread. I took it silently, waited for the door to close, then put on my worn-out coat, grabbed my tote bag, and walked out. There wasn't a bus stop nearby, so I walked 13 blocks under the September sun to the metro, sweat soaking my back. But the simple act of leaving the house made me feel lighter than I had in months. At the store, I bought the cheapest detergent, $8.90, sponges, $1.50, and had less than $10 left for half a loaf of bread. I was waiting in line when I heard someone call my name. "Elaine?" I turned slowly. Sharon. My old friend from the public school where we used to teach. She was 64, 3 years younger than me, but looked 20 years younger. Blonde hair neatly cut, a soft blouse, new jeans. She pushed a cart full of groceries, fresh fruit, yogurt, cheese, wine, and me, with only detergent and sponges. Her eyes swept over me from head to toe, her face changing. "Oh my God, Elaine, you've lost so much weight." I forced a smile. "I'm on a diet, a lie." I wasn't dieting, I was starving for food, for freedom, for life. She frowned, lowered her voice. "A diet? You look gaunt. And what's with these clothes? You never went out like this. What's going on?" My eyes stung. I bit my lip, fighting the urge to cry. I couldn't break down in a grocery store. "I'm fine, Sharon, just a rough patch." She didn't believe me. She grabbed my hand. "We're talking. Right now." She paid for her groceries, covered my bread too, and pulled me into the cafe across the street. She ordered 2 coffees and a slice of carrot cake, pushed it toward me. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." "Eat, Elaine, before I have to feed you myself." I picked up the fork and took a small bite. Sweet, soft, fragrant. I nearly cried at the taste, something I hadn't felt in months. Sharon crossed her arms, her tone firm. "Now talk, and don't give me any diet nonsense. What's happening?" I wanted to deflect, to lie, but her eyes saw right through me, and I broke. I told her everything. The power of attorney, the financial control, the $500 allowance, the cheap food, the cut-off friends, the secret condo, the $75,000. No, I checked my hidden notes. It was over $120,000 gone. By the time I finished, I was crying, wiping my face with a napkin soaked through with tears. Sharon was silent for a moment, then said, "You're housing a parasite, Elaine." "No, he's my son." "No, he's a times parasite asterisk. And worse, you're letting him feed on you." I looked up, eyes red and swollen. "I'm not letting times him. I don't know what to do." She leaned closer, voice calm but firm. "You do know. You're just afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid he'll leave. So you let him hurt you, as long as he stays close. But that's not love, Elaine. That's abuse." I broke down again, because she was right. I was terrified of being alone. I was terrified that if I fought back, I'd lose my only child forever. But I began to wonder, was he still my son, or just a stranger wearing his face, destroying me from the inside out? Sharon cupped my face, forcing me to meet her eyes. "Listen to me. You don't have to endure abuse just because he's your son. A child who doesn't respect his mother doesn't deserve one. Now, you have to fight back." "But how?" I signed the papers. I gave him everything. Power of attorney can be revoked. "We're going to see a lawyer." Today, a chill ran through me, a mix of fear and hope. What if he finds out? What if he loses his temper? No what ifs, Elaine. Do you plan to die slowly in that house? Fade away until there's nothing left but ashes? No. I didn't want that, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark inside me. Not despair. Anger, small but alive. Growing. "I know a lawyer," Sharon said. "His name's Brian Sinclair. He's excellent. His office is downtown. I'm calling him right now." She dialed the number and booked an appointment for an hour later. Brian's office was small but tidy, smelling faintly of fresh coffee. He looked about 50, with salt and pepper hair and glasses hanging on his chest. His handshake was firm, his smile kind. Sharon explained everything while I handed over the documents I had managed to hide the copy of the authorization, bank statements, and the notes I'd secretly kept of Mark's expenses. Brian read each page carefully, then removed his glasses and looked at me. "Mrs. Scott, you are a victim of financial exploitation and elder abuse. This is a criminal offense." My heart pounded. "A crime?" "Yes. He's been using your money for his own benefit without your consent. Power of attorney doesn't mean permission to steal." "But he's my son." "So what?" His tone was firm, but not harsh. "No one has the right to steal from their mother. No one." For the first time, I felt someone stand on my side, that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't exaggerating. What should I do now? Step 1. Revoke the authorization. Step 2. File a formal complaint. Step 3. Block all his access to your accounts. Step 4. Reclaim what's yours. I turned to Sharon. She smiled and squeezed my hand. "Everything's going to be okay." And for the first time in so long, I truly believed it. The fox inside me had finally awakened, and it was ready to bite back. My mother used to say, "Dogs that bark don't bite." She was right. The dangerous ones are quiet. They wait. I had been screaming silently for months, trapped in an invisible cage, but now I was quiet. A dangerous kind of quiet, because the fox had awakened, and foxes never warn before they strike. I left Brian's office with 3 things: a plan, a formal complaint in progress, and something I thought I'd lost forever: determination. Sharon drove me home, talking nonstop. "Be smart, move fast, but keep it secret. Don't let him suspect a thing. Pretend nothing's changed. Be the sweet old lady he thinks you are." I nodded, looking out the window as we passed familiar streets, old limestone houses, the park where I used to play as a child. Everything looked the same, except me. When the car stopped in front of my house, Sharon grabbed my hand before I could get out. "Elaine, are you sure? Because if you start this and back out halfway, he'll crush you." I looked her straight in the eyes and answered firmly, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "I'm sure." Mark was sitting on the Chesterfield when I walked in, a plate of expensive takeout probably from the keg balanced on his lap, the kind of food he bought just for himself while I ate plain rice with eggs. He didn't even look at me, eyes glued to the TV. "Took you long enough, Mum." "Did you get the stuff I asked for?" "Yes," I lied. I had left the detergent and sponges at Sharon's house. They're in the kitchen. He muttered something and turned back to his show. I went upstairs, closed the door quietly, and took a deep breath to calm myself. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my throat and temples. I sat on the bed, took out the instruction sheet that attorney Brian had given me, read it 3 times until I memorized every step, then tore it into pieces and flushed it down the toilet. No one could know about this. The first step was to revoke the power of attorney, but to do that I had to go to the bank while Mark wasn't home. The next morning he left early, saying he had things to handle and wouldn't be back until afternoon. I waited a few extra minutes just to be sure, then put on my neatest clothes, a touch of lipstick, brushed my hair, and looked in the mirror. For the first time in months I saw a real woman again, not a silent shadow. The bank was packed. I took a number and waited nearly 45 minutes before being called. The manager was the same young man in the navy blue suit who had witnessed me sign that stupid paper. He smiled politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Scott. How can I help you today? I'd like to revoke the power of attorney I signed for my son." His smile faded. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He typed a few lines, frowned, and said, "Mrs. Scott, your account has had multiple unusual transactions over the past 2 months, totaling over $80,000. I already knew, but hearing it out loud made my chest tighten. That's exactly why I want to revoke it." He handed me a form, asked for 3 signatures, and directed me to get them notarized next door. When I returned, he said, "Your son no longer has access, but I strongly recommend changing all your passwords." I did it right there. Card PIN, online login, everything. When I left the bank, my legs trembled, but my chest felt lighter. Step 1, complete. Step 2 was to move the remaining money to another bank, so Mark couldn't trace it. Sharon came with me to a branch across town. I opened a new account under my name only, with no authorized users. I transferred all the remaining savings, $60,000. Out of $180,000, he had burned $120,000 in less than 3 months. But what was left was mine, and no one would touch it again. Step 3 was gathering evidence. Whenever Mark went out, I quietly searched the house like a detective. In his room, I found a folder full of contracts, invoices, and estimates, all tied to the condo on Wellington Street. I took photos of every page with my phone. I couldn't take the originals he'd notice, but photos would be enough. I discovered he had made a down payment of $75,000, all withdrawn from my account right before I canceled the authorization. The rest was financed, 12 monthly payments of $2,890 each. And of course, where would those payments come from? My pension. He had planned it perfectly. Keep me alive, control me, hand out allowance money while using my savings to build his future. And me, the foolish mother, living off crumbs until the day I died. Each night I lay in bed staring at the photos on my phone, feeling a cold rage crawl down my spine. Not wild anger anymore, but something sharper, calmer, calculated. Mark had underestimated me. He thought I was stupid, weak, harmless, but his arrogance would become my weapon. Step 4, the most dangerous, filing the report. Attorney Brian came with me to the police station. I brought every piece of evidence, bank statements, photos, transfer records. The investigator, a man around 50, reviewed them carefully, then said, "You have a solid case. This qualifies as financial theft. Shall I open an investigation? How long will it take?" Hard to say. But with evidence like this, not long. I signed my name and took the receipt with trembling hands. There was no turning back now. The battle had begun, and I would win. In the days that followed, I pretended nothing had changed. I still cooked for him, did his laundry, took my allowance, smiled when he said, "Love you, Mum," and lowered my head when he complained about the food. But inside, I was counting down, planning every move, waiting for the right moment. Sharon called every day. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just a little longer." Then, on a Monday night, after 2 weeks of playing the obedient mother, I struck. I waited for Mark to go out to meet friends, probably to spend more of my money, and went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and emptied it completely. Beer, frozen dinners, juice, deli meat, all of it went into the trash. Then I wrote a note, asterisk. From now on, whoever doesn't earn money doesn't eat. Welcome to the real world. Asterisk. Asterisk. The homeowner. Asterisk. I placed the note inside the empty fridge, closed the door, then sat on the porch in my old rocking chair, wrapped in my mother's knitted afghan, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. His scream tore through the night, sharp enough to make the neighborhood dogs bark in chorus. I kept rocking slowly, gazing at the starry sky. For the first time in 3 months, I smiled. His footsteps thundered on the floor. The door slammed open. Mark stood before me, face flushed, veins bulging, eyes wide with fury. "What the hell did you do?" I stayed seated, calm. He pointed toward the house, shaking with anger. "The fridge is empty. Where's the food?" "I threw it out," I said evenly. He took a step forward, fists clenched. "Are you insane? How dare you throw out my times food?" "Your food?" I stood up slowly. "That's strange, because as far as I know, the person who paid for it was me, with the money you stole times from me." He stumbled back half a step, as if I'd slapped him. "Stole? I didn't steal anything. I was managing. Times it." "Managing?" I let out a dry laugh. "You burned $120,000 in 3 months. Bought a condo, filled it with furniture, while I lived on eggs and cold rice, surviving on $500 a month of my own money. That's not management. That's theft." His mouth opened and closed, searching for excuses. I was going to tell you about the condo." "When? After you spent it all? Or after I died so you could inherit the rest?" Sweat rolled down his forehead. "Mum, I did this for our future. We could rent the condo, make extra income. Our future?" My voice rose. "You locked me in this house, cut me off from my friends, handed me allowance money like I was a beggar, bought cheap groceries, treated me like garbage. And you dare talk about a future?" He started to speak again, but I cut him off. I bent down, picked up the folder beside my chair and held it out. You know what I found? You spent $15,000 on flooring, $2,000 on a refrigerator, $8,200 on furniture, $20,000 on a used Ski-Doo you hid in the garage. Want me to keep going? His face turned pale, almost gray. Mum, how did you get that? From your room, I said coldly. My house, my money. I photographed everything, every receipt, every transfer, every dollar you took. He stepped back, nearly tripping. You went through my room. I corrected that, I said. And now? I dropped the folder at his feet, papers scattering around him. Now you'll give it back. He stared at the papers, then at me. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Give it back? Mum, I don't have the money anymore. It's gone. Then sell the condo. I can't. It's under my name. I signed a bank loan. That's times your times problem. He grabbed his head, panicked. You've lost your mind. You can't do this to me. Can't I? I crossed my arms, looking straight at him. Mark, I already have. I revoked the authorization. I changed every password. I moved the remaining money to another account. And I filed the theft report. The room went silent. Mark stared at me like I was someone else, as if he couldn't believe the woman standing before him was the same one he'd crushed for months. You times reported times me? He stammered. Yes, because I'm your mother, and you forgot who you were. My voice was firm. You stole from me, humiliated me, isolated me, made me feel worthless, and now you dare demand loyalty? Loyalty is earned, Mark, and you lost it long ago. He started crying, or pretending to. I didn't care anymore. Mum, please. I know I messed up. Give me a chance to fix it. I'll pay you back, slowly. I'll get a job. Enough, I interrupted, my tone calm but icy. Enough lies, enough empty promises, enough using me. I took a folded paper from my purse and handed it to him. You have 48 hours to leave this house. If not, the police will remove you. His hands shook, nearly tearing the notice. You're kicking me out? Yes, but I have nowhere to go. That is no longer my concern. He dropped to his knees before me, clasping his hands. Mom, please, I'm your son. Don't do this. I looked down at the 8-year-old man crying, begging, as if I were still the soft-hearted mother he could manipulate with guilt. But this time, I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no hate. Just a cold emptiness where love used to be. You were right about one thing, I said quietly. I once thought I only needed a small corner to die in, but now I realize I'm not ready to die, and when I do, it'll be on my terms. In my own home, with my dignity. You won't be here to see it. I turned and walked inside. I locked the door, went upstairs, locked it again. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. No nightmares, no tossing, no fear. The next morning, when I came downstairs, Mark was still sitting on the Chesterfield, eyes red, face drawn. When he opened his mouth, I raised a hand. I don't want to hear another word from you. I went into the kitchen, made coffee, and ate buttered bread, alone, in silence. He stayed there, blank-eyed. The next day, when I came back from the market, his suitcases were neatly stacked in the living room. He left without saying goodbye, without apologizing, without a note. And my first feeling was relief. But the story wasn't over yet, because there was one last secret left to uncover. 3 days after Mark left, I got a call from my late husband's attorney, Miss Wallace. Mrs. Scott, I need you to come to my office. There's a document I was instructed to hold, per your husband's request. My chest tightened. What kind of document? A letter. He told me to give it to you only if Mark ever tried to take your property. I froze for a moment. How did you find out? Attorney Sinclair called me. We're colleagues. He told me about your case. My hands shook as I hung up. Sharon was with me. She'd practically moved in lately to help me get my life back together. A letter? Yes. I don't know what it says, but we'll find out soon. At the office, Miss Wallace greeted us with her usual stern expression, but this time there was something softer in her eyes. Sympathy. She pulled out an old envelope, sealed with red wax, the handwriting on it messy but familiar. Asterisk to Elaine. Open only if Mark becomes the man I always feared he might. Asterisk. My stomach twisted. Miss Wallace handed me the envelope. He gave this to me 2 years before he passed. He said he was afraid your son might one day take advantage of you, and told me to deliver it only if that happened. I suppose that time has come. I held the envelope, feeling its weight. Not just paper, but truth. A farewell. I carefully broke the seal. Inside were 3 handwritten pages, the letters shaky and uneven. He must have written them when he was already sick, when he knew his time was short. Elaine, if you're reading this, it means my fear has come true. Mark has tried to take what belongs to you, and I'm no longer there to protect you. But there's something I never had the courage to say while I was alive. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was ashamed. Ashamed of the son I raised. Mark was different, even as a child. Not evil, at first. Just cold. When other kids cried, he laughed. When someone got hurt, he didn't care. Do you remember the neighbor's dog that got hit by a car? He just said, "It's only an animal." You told me he was just a thoughtless kid, but I knew better. As Mark grew older, things got worse. Lying came as naturally to him as breathing. He often stole money from my purse, and I always thought I had dropped it somewhere. He was good at pretending, good at manipulating, using everyone around him to get what he wanted. I tried being strict, tried to teach him right from wrong, but he didn't change. He only learned to hide it better. 3 years ago, he came to me saying he needed to borrow $20,000 to pay off an urgent debt or he'd be sued. I gave him the money, but I had my doubts. So, I hired someone to investigate. The result, there was no debt. He had used the money to buy a used sports car to flip for profit. He lied to his own father without a blink. That was when I realized our son was not a good man, and he never would be. I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't believe me. You always defended him, said I was too harsh. Maybe I was strict, but strictness doesn't create a monster. Monsters are born that way. That's why I wrote the will as I did. The house is in your name only, indivisible, and if you pass away, it will go straight to charity, never through anyone else's hands. Because I knew that if he ever had the chance, he would take everything from you. And if you're reading this, it means I was right. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry for leaving you to face this alone, but never blame yourself. You are the best mother any child could ever dream of. This is not your fault. It's his. Be strong. Be free. You've always been stronger than you think. Love you, even if I never said it well. Arthur. By the time I reached the last line, tears were streaming down my face. Not from sadness, but from release. I forgave, not Mark, but myself. For months, I had tormented myself, thinking it was my fault, that if I had been different, my son would have been too. But Arthur was right. The problem was never me. Sharon finished reading, then took my hand tightly. Your husband loved you, Elaine, in his own way, but it was real. I wiped my tears and nodded softly. I know. Miss Wallace handed me a tissue and said, "There's one more thing. Your husband left instructions that if you ever needed legal support against Mark, I would represent you for free. He prepaid all legal fees for 5 years." I froze. He did that? 2 years before he passed? Yes, Miss Wallace said gently. He knew. And he did everything he could to protect you. That night, I sat in my rocking chair, holding the letter to my chest, gazing at the starlit sky as a soft moonlight bathed the porch. I whispered, as if Arthur could hear me, "Thank you. Thank you for still protecting me, even from beyond." For the first time since he died, I didn't feel alone. 2 weeks later, Mark texted me, "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I need help. I have nowhere to stay. Can you lend me a few thousand?" I stared at the message for a long time. I thought about replying, about sending money. Then I remembered the letter, everything that had happened, the woman I had become. I replied with one word, "No." Then I blocked his number. The war was over. I had won. And the best part was that once you take back control of your life, good things start to unfold. Stay with me. The story is almost over, but the ending, the ending is worth every second. 6 months have passed. Some mornings, I still wake up amazed that this is my life. Free, whole, and truly living. Today is one of those mornings. I woke up early. The smell of coffee drifted up from the kitchen. It wasn't me who brewed it. It was Priya, the nursing student from Queen's University who rents the back room. The one that used to be Mark's. She's 23 with curly hair tied back, a bright smile, and an energy that makes the house feel alive again. She studies in the morning, works at the hospital in the afternoon, and in the evening, we sit together on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. At first, I was hesitant about having someone else live in the house. After everything I'd been through with Mark, I was afraid to share space again. Afraid of being used, afraid of trusting the wrong person. But Sharon told me, "Elaine, you need company, but from someone real, not someone who clings to you. Post a room for rent, and choose someone who makes you feel comfortable." I did. Priya was the first to reply. She came one Sunday afternoon shyly, holding a small notebook and wearing a nervous smile. She said she was struggling to pay for school, that her family in Ohio couldn't help much. When I looked at her, I saw someone fighting not to take from others but to stand on her own. I nodded. "You can stay. The rent is $650 a month. We'll share the kitchen and bathroom. I cook. You help tidy up. Okay?" She nearly cried with relief. From that day, my house breathed again. When I went to the kitchen this morning, Priya had already set the table for two. Scrambled eggs, crispy toast, fresh fruit, hot coffee with milk. She smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Scott. I'm off today, so I made breakfast for both of us." I sat down eating slowly, tasting the warmth of food made with kindness. "Thank you, sweetheart." She shrugged, smiling even brighter. "You cook for me all the time. It's only fair I return the favor sometimes." After breakfast, Priya went to meet her friends. I stayed home, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I opened the closet, took out a shoebox, and inside were my bank statements. Balance, $140,000. Mark had been ordered by the court to pay me $80,000 in restitution. He'd sold the condo he bought with my money, losing a fortune because he rushed. Still, the payment came through in full, all documented. My monthly pension was back to $3,500, fully under my control. With the room rent and new savings, I finally had real security. I put the papers away and walked to the living room. The house was different now. I had fixed a few things, not everything, since I still needed to save. I painted the walls a light color, almost white, to make the space feel open. Bought a new Chesterfield. Not the turquoise one I'd once dreamed of, but a soft beige that felt like a gentle hug every time I sat down. I replaced the curtains, planted a few pots of flowers on the porch, bought a new fan for the bedroom. Every small change was a quiet declaration. Asterisk, this house is mine. This life is mine. Asterisk. At exactly 10, the gate bell rang. It was Sharon, coming to pick me up for our Wednesday women's group. I put on the new floral blouse I'd bought with my own money and felt light as air. "On the way?" she asked, as she always did. "You doing okay?" "I'm great," I smiled. And this time, it was true. We met in a small church hall, 12 women, all over 60, each carrying her own story. Some widowed, some abandoned, some, like me, betrayed by their own children. We shared, laughed, cried, cooked, and found hope in one another. Today was my turn to speak. The coordinator, Mrs. Ellen, with silver hair and kind eyes, invited me to the center of the circle. "Elaine, would you like to share your story with everyone?" I took a deep breath and began. I spoke about Mark, about control, about fear, but also about Arthur's letter, about justice, and about new beginnings. When I finished, many women were in tears, not out of pity, but because they saw themselves in my story. A woman named Carmen, 72, raised her hand. "My son manages all my money, says it's to help me, but I'm too scared to fight back." I looked at her and said clearly, "You have to fight back before it's too late. No one's coming to save you. Only you can do that." She nodded, tears streaming down, but her eyes shone. After the meeting, Sharon took me to our favorite restaurant, a cozy place with home-style food. We ordered beef on a bun, rice, baked beans and fries, eating and chatting like old times. "You look different," Sharon said. "Different how?" "Lighter." More like yourself. I laughed. Because I am times myself again. That evening, I returned home to a surprise on the porch. A large box wrapped in brown paper, tied with a red ribbon, and a card that read, "Thank you, Mrs. Scott, for giving me a home when no one else believed in me. You are the mother I always wished I had. Love, Priya." My hands trembled as I opened the box. Inside was a sea green knitted blanket, handmade in my favorite color. I sat down in my rocking chair, wrapped it around my shoulders, and cried. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. From belonging. From love. That's when I understood the most important truth. Family isn't blood. Family is the people who stay, who care, and who choose to walk beside you. That night, sitting on the porch under the starry sky, I thought about everything. About Mark, about Arthur, about the fragile woman I once was and the person I had become. I realized you have to fall to learn how to rise, lose to understand what's truly valuable, and hit the bottom to discover how strong you still are. Mark never reached out again after I blocked him. Neighbors said he rented a small apartment and got a steady job. Whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter anymore. He's no longer my responsibility. I did my duty as a mother, raised him, loved him, protected him, and he chose another path. That choice is his, and so are its consequences. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Arthur, for believing I was strong enough. You were right." Then I said softly to myself, "Thank you, Elaine, for not giving up." Because true wealth isn't what we own. It's what we refuse to let others take from us, and the most precious thing of all is our self-respect. Some wounds never heal the way we expect, but time and courage turn them into scars. Not painful anymore, just reminders of how strong we were to survive. I once thought a mother's love was an unbreakable bond, but now I understand love must be nurtured with respect and honesty. When someone only takes and never gives, that's not love, it's a burden. It took me nearly a lifetime to learn one simple truth. Loving your child doesn't mean losing yourself, because only when you preserve your dignity and self-respect can you truly give love that's real. Family, after all, isn't where you endure. It's where you belong, where you find peace, and where you are loved. And you, have you ever had to stand up for yourself against the people you love? Share your story in the comments, because I believe each of us has our own journey to reclaim strength and faith. And if you want to keep walking with me through stories of resilience, love, and freedom, follow the channel, so we never lose each other along the way.